All right, welcome to day number one of the first course ever from the Sweet Gum Spot, How to Grow Your Own Food. Anyone can do it. Thank you all for joining me. We are going to get right into it so you can just get what you need and move on with your day and enjoy your Saturday. So today's class is all about assessing your space. So looking at where you're thinking of growing things and what that space, what that space offers, as well as what potential obstacles that they might have. So I'm going to be looking kind of back and forth here. I've got the same notes you do, those course notes that I sent you. And so I'm going to just be jumping back and forth a little bit as we go to make sure that I don't miss anything. First things first, about me, I started gardening about 6 years ago, maybe a little more than that, down in Georgia when I was in graduate school. My husband and I was not my husband then, he was my fiance, but we had a tiny balcony that was maybe 6 feet by 10 feet, maybe, which we did some planters and container gardening on. Didn't get great sun. We also knocked, like we had lettuce on the railing, and either wind blew it off or my husband knocked it off. I can't remember. And so we didn't have any lettuce. And so that was those couple years down there were very full of mistakes and learning, but also a really fun time and excitement because it was the first time we ever grew anything. And so every success was really awesome. But other than that, because I lived in Georgia, we gardened there for, I guess, 3 years, and we've been gardening here in Indiana for 3 years. So I've got some experience with different climates. And then also when I was little, I was not familiar with growing much of anything when I was little. However, I did, like, my pap and I, my grandfather on my mom's side, we grew some tomatoes, we grew some pumpkins one year, and some sunflowers. And the sunflowers faced the wrong way. They faced the neighbor's yard, and the pumpkin never turned orange, so we painted it orange. So that was the extent of my experience gardening when I was little. But I kind of remember, like, I watered them and knew that you had to prune tomatoes. Now, did I know how to prune tomatoes? No, because I severely over pruned them one year at the beginning and then under pruned them. Now we're kind of finding that mix finally. But yes, I've been learning a lot over the past several years and have been able to grow things in different areas of the country too, which has been very helpful. So, yeah, that's a little bit about me. I decided to bring this course to you because I think that gardening is the best thing since sliced bread. There's multiple reasons for that. So, I mean, back about those 6 years ago, whenever we first started gardening, we were in kind of a health journey, reaching, trying different diets. We tried keto. My husband tried carnivore. We tried paleo and I mean, we succeeded. We did all of them and we enjoyed all of them for different reasons. But the thing that all of those experiments and eating, trials, experiences taught me was that more than anything, just good quality ingredients are going to yield better results in your health and in your living, not necessarily eliminating bread or carbs entirely, but finding fresh, good carbs and, like sweet potatoes and squashes and things, or making bread yourself. So that's how we kind of found ourselves on this journey to from scratch cooking, gardening things ourselves, homesteading, which is where we are now. So it was kind of, we didn't know that's where we were going to get to in the beginning, but that's kind of how it started, was because our health was really important to us and we were doing our best to be fit, healthy people. And it started just trying all these diets and then shopping at the farmer's market and then growing our own herbs and then growing this. And now this year we've taken down a tree in our backyard to basically triple the size of our garden and try and grow a year's worth of food, at least potatoes and tomatoes and things like that. So it's been a slow but steady snowball that is growing. And that's just one aspect of it. In addition to the health portion, obviously, the past few years have thrown us some curveballs in terms of toilet paper or even a lot of the supply chain shortages that are happening still today. And with all the things that are going on in current events, which are many, um, I just don't think it's a bad idea to have this skill under your belt. Even if you're not growing acres and acres of food, just knowing how could come in handy one day. And hopefully, Lord willing, we don't ever have to use it for anything like emergency related, but to know that you're able to provide healthy, non-processed fruits and vegetables for your family of your own accord in your own little area, it's a good skill to have, in my opinion. So those two things combined mainly, along with the fact that when we started that health journey, we just really started to realize like all the canola oils and vegetable oils and soybean and soy and all of that processed food, one, is terrible for you, but it's all part of this giant food system that's it's really broken and it's falling apart slowly. And so not wanting to support that, wanting to support our healthy body, wanting to be able to provide for ourselves if we needed to, and because we can, are all part of the reasons that I became so passionate about this way of life and why I ultimately decided to bring it to you. So that is kind of in a nutshell. We could go much more into detail about all of those things and have a great discussion, I'm sure. But that's in a nutshell why I think it's really beneficial to start gardening right now, like this year. Don't wait anymore. Don't put it off. Even if it's one pot, just get going, because it's going to start and it's going to be gradual, but you'll learn something every single year with each success and with each failure. So, with that being said, I'm going to move down in my notes here. So, one of the, I guess, for lack of a better word, excuses or reasons people give me that they don't have a garden is, I don't have enough blank. So, how can I grow my own food? Whether it's space, money, time, experience, all those kinds of things. And so, what we're going to first go into is the space aspect. So, a lot of us, especially if we're in the suburbs or in the cities, we are definitely short on space. And so, luckily, we live in a time where the internet is our oyster, and we have tons and tons of creative solutions out there. So real quick, I'm just going to go through the different types of spaces. There might even be more that I didn't list here, but the different types of general spaces that we normally grow in, and then some of your options for that. And I am going to try and share my screen when I show some of these things to give you some ideas, because there's some really cool things here, but hopefully that works. So let's see. Let me take a sip of coffee first. Yeah. Okay. So first things first, if you're in a like New York City apartment, no balcony, no nothing, you have a nice windowsill. You can grow in a windowsill. Might not be much, but you can grow there. You can also grow on your balcony like we did back in Georgia. Get some pots, get some hanging things, vertical planters, all that different kind of stuff. Then get a little bit bigger. You might have a porch or a patio. Again, you can get all different kinds of container gardening, planters, raised beds. Maybe they do have some kits that actually would work well. It's kind of like a border or decorative area around your porch or your patio area. And odds are, if you have a porch or patio area, you have a little bit at least of in-ground edging around there that you might be able to plant in as well. And then if we move a little bit further away from your house or your abode, you might have a backyard garden. So that's where you might bring some of those raised beds. Like we have 4 feet by 4 feet beds we built. You can do any dimensions that you want, really. But like I said, they have kits for them. You can also build them yourself. But your backyard garden is going to most likely be a mix of all of these things. Maybe some planters, maybe some raised beds, maybe right in the ground. So as you can see, the larger your space gets, you're going to be layering on top of yourself, on top of each of these things. So um, you could do everything on ground or everything on raised beds, but I'm telling you from experience, and maybe it won't be this year, but you're going to start to get a little antsy, and even that backyard garden will start to run out of space. So I'm sorry, the sun keeps coming in and out like this, so the light is being weird. But so yeah, so as you grow and as your knowledge grows, your space is going to feel like it's shrinking, and so you're going to want to come up with more creative ideas to get the most out of that space, which means you're either going to add more containers, dig more raised beds, go into the ground in a new place, or go up, which is really cool as well. And then the last thing is in-ground rows. Those are your typical, if you see a homestead or a farm, something where people have more space to devote to a singular crop and they're trying to get more production rather than variety, that's where you're going to get into rows. So like I said, we have 6 4x4 raised beds. We with those normally follow square foot gardening, which I'll talk about in a minute. And so that allows us to get all different kinds of stuff in a relatively small space. Since we got the tree taken out last year, we are have like a 600 or 700 square foot area that's now just opened up to us. And so now we're going to get into that row area a little bit and do a couple rows of potatoes, couple rows of brassicas, which are like broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower. And so the more space you have, like then you can really use those areas to focus on one crop, make a whole bunch of it, rather than if you don't have a ton of space, you might want to, maybe you still just want to grow all one thing, which is great because then you could still supplement all of your tomatoes for the year or all of your hot peppers for the year. But you won't, if you're in a smaller space, most people try to get a little bit of this, a little bit of that, because it's fun and it's really neat. So those are the different types of growing areas. Now we're going to go into types of planting areas. So how we plant in those areas. And I've mentioned them. You can be in the ground. You can use containers. Now, containers are also, I guess, like budget. It depends on your budget. You can use all different kinds. So they have, there's some options that you're going to pay for. There's some options you can build. And there's options that you can like recycle sort of and like source free, which is cool. So you've got your 5-gallon buckets, which are budget friendly. They are, you can find food grade 5-gallon buckets. They're also space friendly. So if you just need a bunch of them, you can grow carrots in there. I've known people to grow potatoes in there. You can grow tomatoes, all different kinds of stuff. And it might not be the most Pinterest worthy, beautiful thing, but it's going to get the job done. Then this is where we start to get pretty interesting, in my opinion. So in addition to 5-gallon buckets, you've this like I'm listing here some things that aren't like your normal clay pots or your row planters. Those kinds of things we know you can go to Home Depot and Lowe's and get those. Those are all in there. These are just some extra little unique things that in case you didn't know. So there's 5-gallon buckets. I'm skipping vertical planters for a minute. There's these things called grow bags. So let me share my screen. I guess I'll just click this button. Okay. One moment. Okay, I think I'm sharing. Okay, great. So let's go to this link. So these grow bags here are fabric and they have handles, so they're really heavy duty. They will last multiple seasons. You can get them in all these different kinds of sizes, as you see, but they're great for small spaces, and they are really cool because since they're fabric, they have built-in kind of drainage. So whereas a 5-gallon bucket, you're gonna have to drill holes into the bottom of that. These don't, but they do come at a little higher price point. But a lot of people I know definitely grow potatoes in here. So that's something cool. All right, now let's try, if I can, I have to move this because I have the bar. All right, X out of that. Okay, So now we get to vertical planting. This is something that's very interesting. I did not know about it until we started looking into finding some more space-saving ways. Now, there's more than just like this type of planter. You can build your own vertical planter for all I care, but up is always an option. So if you can't go out any further, you can always go up. But these green stock planters are so neat. I got one for Christmas and I'm chomping at the bit to get to use it this year. But I think this is the one my husband got me. They are a little bit pricey, but again, they last for years. And the amount of production you can get out of this is unbelievable because we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tiers. And I think they each have like 6 or 8 cells. Let's see if it says. I don't know exactly. You can click the link and look on there, but it's got a bunch of cells all the way around. And so each of these cells you can plant a new plant in. So you can plant strawberries, you can plant herbs, you can plant lettuce. I mean, they have a specific green stock planter that's specifically for lettuce. And I mean, you can produce a ton. People grow cucumbers out of here. It's unlimited, and they have guides on there as well. So I'm really excited about this particular planter, but there are lots of different options out there in terms of vertical gardening, but that's just one thing to think about. So, and then the last thing here, if you didn't know this, so a lot of like Habitat for Humanity restores, they will get rid of pallets. And you know, you can build like a pallet couch. You can do all different kinds of things with pallets. But I just wanted to give you some ideas here. I mean, Pinterest is full of beautiful pictures, but you can actually use these pallets to grow things in. Now you can lay them flat if you have the space, but you can also do them vertical. So you can do like little pots in there, or you can grow right in them. A lot of people do these pallet herb gardens, and you can grow lettuce. And it's kind of similar to that green stock concept, but instead of 3D, you just get that one side. But I've also seen, and if you search, I'm sure you'll find it, they have, here, I'll stop sharing now. Okay, we're back. They have, you can do that with pallets, but then they also sell like special wall hangings that you can put inside. So you can actually like turn your apartment wall into a growing, like a living wall, which is really cool. So those are some neat ideas, I think, in terms of space saving solutions for that vertical aspect. And they can be really, really, really neat decorations too. So if you are getting a lot of free pallets, fill them with dirt, and there you go. And then last but not least, I'm not going to share the screen on this, but Raised Beds is down there. So I linked there this book that I have. So if you want to get it, you can. None of these links I sent are affiliates or anything like that. So it's just resources for you. But this book, Square Foot Gardening, All New Square Foot Gardening by Mel Bartholomew. This is the book I was talking about when we did Square Foot Gardening. We actually followed this book kind of like a manual. And it was a good starting point for us because we've diverged from that a little bit. A lot of the principles we still use, but some of the things we've decided to do a little differently. But I mean, they have plans in here for, I'm going to show you the raised beds. You can build like a trellis. You can build like cages, all different kinds of things. And then, so these, you can build a standing raised bed. It's a very, very good resource, but it has tons of information on when to plant things, how close, how far. But then it also does have those building plans if you want to get handy and build your own raised beds, which is really cool. So those are great for on your patio, on your porch, out in your yard, whatever you'd like. So moving down, we've talked about space. Now we can talk about budget. I already highlighted some of these options that are budget friendly, but the extent of your spending on your garden really is up to you. I will say that if this is the first year you've ever gardened ever and you don't have anything, those startup costs are going to be a bit more. You'll obviously have to buy like dirt if you're not planting in the ground. You'll have to buy the containers, maybe a spade or trowel. You're going to have to buy some seeds. So those are costs that will be a little bit more in that first year. But then as you start to acquire things, like you won't need to buy seeds every year. You won't need to buy new containers every year, all that kind of thing. So I mean, you can get real fancy. You can buy that planter. You can get like a drip irrigation system if, you don't have a budget, which would be great. But even us, who we're obviously trying to do a lot here on a relatively small property, there are still so many ways that I'm trying to get as much as I can for free or very cheap, because the more money I save in one area, that frees up other like money to get bees or to get bunnies or something like that. So one thing that we did that helped us hugely this year was we sourced wood chips. Now that area that we had the tree cut down, there it was like dirt and weeds, and it's pretty acidic soil since pine tree was there. And so since we knew we wanted to plant in the ground, we knew that we needed to do some amending of the soil, which we will talk about that, I think, on the third class. But we needed to get that soil to more of a richer, more nutrient dense form instead of the clayey, acidic, weedy soil that it was. So we knew that we had to get some wood chips. It's a style of gardening called back to Eden gardening, which means that you put organic matter on top, and then as time happens, as water happens, all the nutrients just leach down into that soil. And I mean, you can look at online, there's pictures of like super clayey soil, and right next to it where the back to Eden gardening was used, it's rich and dark and full of microbes, which is great. So that's our hope, is that we'll get to that point. But we actually, when we got the tree removed, I said, hey, can we keep those wood chips? And the tree people are always very happy to give you their wood chips, because that means that saves them a trip. They don't have to go wherever they dump them. They just dump them in your driveway. So we got a nice big pile of wood chips for free, covered that area, but then we were like, well, we're probably going to have to buy some to add on top of that, but that was a good supplement at least. Well, fast forward a few weeks, the lady across the street had her 65-foot tall tree removed, and the same guy, same company, I ran over and said, remember me? Can we have those wood chips? And so we had, and still have, because we haven't finished moving it, a pile of wood chips as wide as our driveway and almost as tall as our garage. That's a lot. We have a lot of area, and we're actually going to be covering all of our raised beds, some other areas that we're going to be gardening as well, and then giving the rest to our friends who have 5 acres, a little homestead as well for their chickens. But that, I mean, I couldn't even estimate. It was an entire huge truckload of wood chips that we got twice for free. That's hundreds of dollars we've saved. Whereas last year when we bought mulch for our raised beds, like the aisles in between, we spent almost $200 just for that. And that wasn't even enough to cover it because we got weeds throughout there. So that was a really big savings. And yeah, some people might look at us weird because we have a big pile of wood chips in our driveway, but I'd rather that than have to pay thousands of dollars to do it right. So there's all different ways like that. Like I said, using 5-gallon buckets, using the pallets. There's a lot of things you can recycle and repurpose that are going to serve as great containers, be great like budget-friendly ways to get things started. Another thing is your municipality or your neighborhood where you live, most of them have some kind of composting program. And so if you don't have compost of your own and you don't want to go to the hardware store or Home Depot and pay for it, you can oftentimes get compost there for either free or much lower cost. So that's something cool too. And then the last thing is time. So this is really as much as you want to put into it. you can put 5 minutes in, go water your things and leave. You can go walk out there and admire them and talk to them and spend tons of time out there, or you can be somewhere in between. I will say that from experience of myself doing it, as well as what other people that I try to learn from have told me, is that being in the garden is more important than anything. You don't have to be doing something every time, but just being there, making it a place of respite for you, of rest, of relaxation, of wonder. We have an old wrought iron bench that we just inherited when we bought this house. And when we cleared that tree, I moved that bench and put it right over the stump because I want a place to sit and just like soak it all in. And what's going to be great is that's going to be a really nice place for me to have my morning coffee, but it's also going to force me to sit out there, which we already did like morning walks in the garden anyway, but to sit out there and as you spend time out there or next to your plant or walking by it, making sure that you're not neglecting it, you might see a weed that's come up. You'll pull that just one at a time. Or you might see a squash that's ready. So then you'll pull that. So being present is more important than working really hard necessarily, because you're going to keep things maintained better if you're just spending 5 minutes a day, walking through and you see something and you do this and you do this, rather than letting all those weeds get out of control or letting the harvest get absolutely ridiculous. And then you have to spend hours out there. Now, in terms of the harvest, you won't spend hours, but you might have to spend a decent amount of time picking cherry tomatoes anyway, but that's the fun part. The weeding, especially, and maintaining that soil is going to be much easier to handle if you don't let it get out of hand and out of control. And if you just, every time you're in there, you do a little something. And so it's not like a huge chore. It's just you're there and you happen to see it. And so you take care of it. So that's definitely my number one tip in terms of time, is just being present and being friends with your garden. All right. So then now we get to getting started. So this is really where we're going to start assessing our space. So there's some questions we have to ask before we start planting, before we buy seeds, any of that. And I've got 3 that I've come up with. The first one is, what are your goals? This is a big question. If your goals are to just have a little fun and see if you can grow something, you're not going to want to grow a 2,500 square foot garden because you will have no idea where to begin. You will plant way too much, you'll get overwhelmed, burnt out, and you'll never do it again. If your goals are providing a year's worth of food for yourself, you're probably going to need more than just 2 flower beds, right? So your goals dictate your course of action. So think about, if this is something that's just a hobby for you, that's great. That's really great. It's a good hobby. It gets you outside, gets you eating healthy, good things. If you want to supplement your food sources just seasonally, so say you don't want to have to go to the store or the farmer's market for vegetables in the summer, and you just want to be able to eat fresh vegetables from your backyard all summer long. Awesome. That is really rewarding. I can tell you, I love doing that. And then if you want to provide a year's worth of food, that's a whole nother game. How much are you going to have to grow? You need to really do some calculating at that point. This year, we've especially had to look at how much end product do we want? And then you can look at, say you want, I don't know, you eat 2 pounds of potatoes, your family eats 2 pounds of potatoes every week, right? Then you look at how many plants or how many pounds of produce does a potato plant produce? Well, each plant normally produces 2 pounds of potatoes, I think, if I can remember correctly. So then in order to do that all year round, how many plants do you need? That's a lot, right? So there's a little bit more back end work in that, because you just want to make sure that you're doing your math right, so that you're not just throwing things up in the air. It's not a guessing game. If you follow the procedure and you do things right as much as you can with what is in your control, we can't really control the weather, but it's going to be a lot more likely that you're going to achieve those goals than if you just go, oh, I hope it works, right? So think about what are your goals. Now the second question is, how much time do you have to devote? Are you running around crazy busy, or are you retired and you have all the time in the world? Think about that. Being realistic with that and not getting overly excited and then getting really sad when everything dies is more important, in my opinion, in terms of keeping the interest alive. Because if you really get excited about it 1 year, but then everything goes terrible and you never want to do it again, then what's the point? And then the last question is, what is your realistic budget? And I say realistic because you want to be able to, again, achieve those goals. And if you draw out this grand, like you might have a lot of space and you draw out this grand plan, but then it ends up being like $1,000 and you don't have that, then you're going to be really bummed out. Now, maybe it's worth it to like draw out the grand plan first and then scale back and see where you can go. But what I wouldn't want to happen is for you to get halfway through making the grand plan come to life and then run out of money and not be able to do anything. So, also I will say that if you do get buying seeds and that's part of your budget, and all the seed pictures just look so pretty, let me tell you, I am victim of this, and they have sales and all that kind of stuff, and you start buying this and buying that and buying that and buying that and buying that, and then you're up $100 in seeds, and then you don't even have enough space to plant them all. Was that a smart decision? I don't know. So that's some questions to think about. And then once you've answered your questions, you know your goals, you know how much time you're planning on spending and money you're planning on spending, we can really get started now. So the first thing you're going to want to do, again, before you pick these seeds, is you need to find out what zone you live in. A zone in your country, or in our country, and maybe in the world, there are different growing zones. So this is all different types of climates. When your first frost is, when your last frost is, what type of sun you get, what kind of crops grow well there. Those are all the different types of things that you need to, or that are part of in your zone. So I will quick share my screen again real fast just to show you. This website is very fun. You can find your zone on like multiple websites, but this is from the USDA. Okay, let's hope it works. I need to update my computer software. And so when this loads, you'll see this is a plant hardiness zone map. So it's a map of the whole US, and it's taking its time. There you go. Okay. And what you will do, you'll see like all these different colors. And I believe there's 13 zones, and every zone has an A and a B. And all that is just temperatures, really. And so what we'll do is we go right here, find address for place. So let's say Fort Wayne, that's where I am, Indiana. And I click that, and it tells me there I am. I am in, whoop. Okay, that's a lot. Where is it? I guess you just find the color. So we're in 6A. All right. So you match your color. You're in 6A. So then what you can do, I don't know if it's on this website or if you go to like the Farmer's Almanac, 6A. It'll give you a whole planting calendar. So it'll tell you what to start when, what grows well. Oh, that's not what we wanted. Let's try this. Okay, so this has different planting guides, but if you go around on here, you can find your zones No, thank you. Let's try one more time. Maybe, here we go. Yeah, things are being slow. And the Farmer's Almanac isn't the only website. Obviously, there's multiples, but maybe if it'll go. I don't know if it's going to work. Oh, here we go. Okay. So it'll show us planting dates for spring in Fort Wayne, Indiana. We want to say for basil, start indoors, March 5th through the 20th. And then I don't know. Oh, based on frost dates, based on moon dates. And then you want to transplant at these dates, or beets you're going to start outside, all that kind of stuff. So there's lots of sites like that. The Farmer's Almanac has been around for a long time, so they're pretty reputable. But Burpee Seeds has one, I'm sure. There's multiple sites like that. But if you go to that website I've linked, find your zone, then you can do some research on what grows well in your zone, when to time things, and all of that. Our course is timed, so pretty much no matter what zone you're in, you're going to be fine. By the time we have everything started, you'll be good to go. And then I will say that unless you're like super expert gardener, stick to that zone and stick to what it tells you about that zone. So there's lots of ways you can extend your season. So you can like get a high tunnel or a greenhouse and grow things earlier and later when it's colder. But right now we really want to focus on making sure that bulk of our growing season is thriving, is going well, and stretching things out a little bit is maybe going to pull focus, and also could be kind of risky because that requires a whole nother set of knowledge in terms of making sure temperatures are right and sun is right, since it's not the ideal growing conditions for that plant. So then once you know your zone, you're going to make some observations about your space. Some things, especially if you're growing outside, even if you're growing in a window, you've got to know what direction that window is facing. You want your plants, ideally, to have south-facing sun. So if you're building beds, you want them to probably be facing that way. If you have a south-facing window, that's where you're going to want to try and put those windowsill planters, because that's the strongest sun, it's the best light for the plant, and it's going to give it the best chance of doing really, really well. You're also going to want to look at shade and see if you're planting in a super shady area or not. And there are plants, some plants like shade, some plants don't. And so that's going to feed into where you plant what. And then you are also going to look at any obstacles you can foresee happening. So if you have like a lot of bunnies or squirrels, or if you know that you always get really bad grasshoppers in late summer, something like that, pests are really important. And some you won't realize until you get in the thick of it. But that's something that's very important to try and at least be aware of as you're going into things, because you might not succeed, but you might be able to diminish the damage that they do. And then also if your area floods a lot, or if you're prone to droughts, if you're going on vacation, you're going to need someone to watch the place. This is all just thinking that can happen ahead of time and save you from a super stressed out couple of days when you're like, I don't know what to do. So all of these three things, like thinking about your sun, thinking about your shade, thinking about your obstacles, basically, those are some permaculture principles. And so if you've never heard of permaculture, it's another type of gardening where it's really letting nature do what nature does best. So in like big permaculture gardens, they've got three levels. They have the base, the middle, and then the canopy. So you might have strawberry plants or root vegetables down below, a berry bush here, and then maybe a nut tree or something up above, or an apple tree. But it's utilizing how nature normally works to encourage growth and all of that kind of stuff in the garden. So if you're willing or wanting to get even a little bit deeper, that's it's a really great way to use your space as well, because then you can plant multiple things because you've got multiple layers. And you're going to be looking like, if you're planting on a hill, you're going to want to put your garden maybe a little lower than that hill, like lower on the hill, so that water comes down and it will water the garden. It'll keep it nice and moist, but you're not going to want to put it all the way at the bottom because that's the floodplain. So then it might get overwatered. But it's just a really kind of cool way because, again, rain is free. And the more you can use free things, the better. So then once you've know your zone, made your observations, it's time to plan your layout. I love, and of course I've lost it. It's downstairs actually, using graph paper. So next week I will show you, I have a big rectangle tablet of graph paper, and each little cube represents 1 square foot. And so I've drawn out, we've measured our growing area. I've drawn out exactly to scale our growing area. And then I can place what we're going to grow where. So it gives you a real, realistic outlook of how much space you have, what you can plant, how you want things to look, if you want it to be a little bit pretty too. And then if it's on graph paper and you're using pencil, you can erase it. And that's kind of a fun time because when you're inside cold in January and February, you can draw out like as many versions of this garden as you want, and you can dream up all these beautiful ideas, and then you can pick one later. So it's a good way to get all the things up in here down in real life and give you a kind of bird's eye view at what you're going to be doing and what you're going to be working with. And then, yeah, like I said, use some kind of abbreviations or shapes or whatever helps you visualize the space. So I actually, like against our one fence wall, we're going to be planting all of our broccolis, cauliflowers, and cabbages. And so I know what colors those things are going to be. So I designed it so I'm going to have like a purple cabbage here, then a regular cabbage, then some flowers, then some broccoli, because I want it to be vibrant and beautiful looking just as much as productive. So I think that's really fun because it really is, you're like painting this picture, and then you get to put things out there and it happens, and it's really cool. And so then the last thing after you plan your layout, you're going to want to gather your materials. So this is probably the most important piece here before we get started, starting our seeds. So you're going to need seed starting materials. So the first thing, you need something to put your seeds in. That's germination trays of some sort. So you can get those little plastic trays. You can use old egg cartons. I would use the like cardboardy ones, not the foam ones. Whoop, sorry. My husband's putting together grow lights or getting ready to tap our maple tree. I'm not sure. But, and then you can also use cups. We have peat cups. You can use red Solo cups if you're on a budget. You can use soil blocks, which is really cool. So they actually have a specific tool called a soil blocker, and it's like a little clampy thing. I can go grab it real fast. One second. Ours is brand new and shiny looking because this is the first year we're using it, but it's this really nifty tool. And so what you do is you get your dirt and you put it in a bucket, bin, something like that. And you get the dirt really wet, not all the way to mud, but really wet so that it will clump together. And then you're gonna stick this all the way down in the dirt, and then you press that down and let it go, and it makes these blocks of packed down soil. And they're like 2 by 2 square blocks with a little indent in there for the seed. And so the thing that really excites me about soil blocks this year is that when you use the peat cups you can put straight in the ground, but they don't break down very fast, which is not a huge deal, but sometimes the roots have a little trouble getting out, so you have to rip the bottom off. You don't, like the soil blocks, they're not in a plastic thing. You don't have to finagle them out. And theoretically, many people have done this, so hopefully it works for us as well. The moisture keeps that dirt together in the beginning, and then once the seeds germinate, the roots keep them together. So you have this little block and it's nice and sturdy, and you just put it in the ground. So there's virtually no transplant shock. Whereas when you're taking something else from either a carton or a container of some sort and putting it in the ground, it can sometimes get a little bit of shock. So, and I mean, there's not going to be no shock with the soil blocks, but it's going to be a lot less because they're not really going from one thing to the other. They're just going into more of what they're already made of, which is dirt. And then you're going to need to get your planting medium. So what you're planting in. Now this could be what you're starting your seeds in, but also you're going to want to get like your garden soil as well. If you're not planting in ground, you'll need some potting soil for those containers as well. So for the garden, you can use potting soil and then fertilize it. For seed starting, if you have potting soil, that's fine, you can get that, but you're probably going to want to sterilize that by baking it. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we start our seeds, but basically all different kinds of dirt has little bugs and little microbes in it, and sometimes it can carry disease, like especially if you used soil in the ground from last year where you had a big pest problem, or like your tomatoes or your potatoes got blight, then that soil could still have some disease in it, which could affect your seeds. So you want as blank of a slate as you can possibly get. So the brand of soil we're using this year is called Fox Farms, and it's froggy soil. I'll show it to you when we start our seeds. And it's very high quality, very good stuff. You don't need to sterilize that because they're super selective in their growing process, or their growing of soil, their creation process. And so it's clean and it's disease free for the most, I would hope so, for the most part. But then you can also get coconut coir, which is really absorbent and really good for seed starting, has a lot of nutrients. Or they also have seed starting mixes, which is a little bit of all of those things. So point is, you need something to put those seeds in. Then you're going to need to get some grow lights for indoors. Depending on what you're growing, you like some of these things you just put right outside. But a lot of things like tomatoes and peppers and all the big summer vegetables we like, they like warm weather. It's not warm out yet. So we need to give them a head start inside so that when we put them outside, one, they're sturdy enough to handle it out there, but they're also gonna we'll have them already big enough so that they can grow faster, and we'll have enough time in our growing season to enjoy their harvest. So you need some grow lights. I've linked a few, or at least one pair that I like there. And then heating mats, potentially. We actually just invested in some of these. They're not really expensive. They're like between $15 and $20 per heat mat. But for germination, like when you want those seeds to sprout, it needs to be between 70 and 80 degrees. We have our grow light set up in our laundry room, which is basically a root cellar. I mean, it's cold. And so it just dawned on me today, actually, that we've had the past couple of years slow growing seedlings. They would sprout and they would grow, but everyone else's tomato plants would be super tall and all this kind of stuff. And ours would just be small. They were hardy, but they were small. And I'm betting you it's because it's cold down there. And so they were growing slowly. So we actually just got some heat mats. And I'm very excited to see if they help our germination and help things grow a little feistier, which would be good. And then obviously you need some water. So you'll either need just a little glass or a watering can, or especially when things are just starting out and we're trying to get that germination and be gentle and not disturb too much, I just like using a spray bottle and moistening the soil that way. So that might be a little slow depending on how much you're growing, but that's my favorite way to do it at the very beginning. And then last thing you're going to get is your garden tools. I'm sure I probably forgot some here, but you need a watering can or a hose with a gentle spray nozzle. You do not want to be spraying your plants on like jet setting. That would, especially if you've just planted like carrot seeds or beet seeds, those go straight in the ground. They're going to go everywhere, and that's not going to work. So gentle spray, like a misting, is what you're going to want. Pruning shears for pruning things as well as harvesting. Zucchinis and squash and all that You don't want to just rip them off. You actually want to snip them cleanly. And then you're going to need some kind of thing to dig your hole where you're going to put your plant. So a spade or shovel, and then a broad fork or some kind of hoe if you're planting in the ground, because you can till, but a lot of times it's not necessary because it actually disturbs the soil more than it needs to be. So that broad fork aerates it, gets it nice and loose, but it doesn't destroy the whole ecosystem down there. So, whew, that was a lot. So that is the end of day one. We've learned how to assess our space, talked about some of the obstacles we might overcome in terms of space, time, and money. We've talked about all the different questions you need to mull over in terms of your goals, and then how to get started, and all the kinds of materials you need. So I hope you enjoyed this first class. I look forward to next week seeing you when we're going to talk about selecting seeds, which is the most fun part, because you can go to the companies and look at all the pretty pictures and just dream up the best garden and all the yummy food you're going to eat and all that kind of stuff. So I will see you same time next week for day number